Genshin Impact is, without a doubt, one of the biggest names we as the gacha community have seen. Its popularity and influence are near immeasurable, something that even Dawei, the president of Hoyoverse, never expected.
我们是2017年的时候开始立项做原神的嘛，然后那时候的米哈游还比较小，所以我们现在回想起来看，我觉得如果后来知道做原神有这么难，可能我们当时就没有勇气去做了。
The game is an open-world RPG with unique characters, interesting combat interaction styles, a unique... Well, you know the game, don't you? That's why you clicked on this video. You don't need me to repeat the whole sponsor spiel all over again. It does surprise me to no end how many big creators have been sponsored to talk about Genshin Impact, and if you're keeping up with Hoyoverse, its spiritual successor Star Rail. Massive names like MadPat from Game Theory or Jacksepticeye have been sponsored to make entire videos on the game, and years after the game still does insanely well. It speaks volumes to just how much consistent success it's had, managing to maintain its popularity and influence even after it was considered at its peak. It's also equally as obvious that a game so massive like Genshin Impact will have its fair share of bad actors trying to defame it. It's not like it's always intentional. Genshin Impact is not the first, nor will it be the last, to experience the extreme backlash and hate of anything within it. Not the first or last to experience a toxic minority so vocal it ends up looking like the majority, or just the frankly horrifying stories that could come out of it. Even making this video kind of makes me a target, so I'm just not gonna try poking that beehive too much. Let's call this an IP getting so impossibly big that it gets just as impossible to regulate the community. The Genshin Effect. Me, I first discovered Genshin through a YouTube advert, one of the first, I believe, animations to be shipped out, and you could just tell there was something about it. The graphics, the music, the voices, the nuance, how all the anime games out there, there was something that just drew you in. It was enchanting even. You could really tell there was actual love and care put into the game. The developers were clearly passionate about it. So, of course, I pre-registered and the rest is really history. You wouldn't even be seeing this video if it wasn't down to that one advert. It goes to show how powerful good marketing is. It's the same for anything. If you make art or even videos like this, the product being good is just as, if not more important than how you market it. And if you've ever asked how a launch player got into Genshin Impact, they'd probably tell you the advertising, if not Honkai Impact, their previous game. In addition, I'd also say there are two other factors: the accessibility of the game and the story. These made people cling to the game and hook them to it as long as possible. What the game did is break into an overseas market that many had tried to do to varying levels of success, but practically overnight in places such as the Philippines, Kumusta Kabayan, and Indonesia, people were raving about the game because they would basically experience a AAA title for free on their phones. And in countries where good tech is expensive, this is amazing. Yes, mobile games in the market is nothing new in these areas. Yes, the storage space of the game has gotten a little tighter, but it's managed to capture such a huge market and keep them hooked for one other reason: the entire story and all the characters. In my last video I described them as being separate, which was a complete fault on my part because really, the story and the characters are one and the same. These interesting plotlines keep people hooked, alongside interesting characters and good voice acting. There are some plotlines which are considerably weaker than others. For example, Inazuma's arc left a lot to be desired, but over time, the writers really have improved considerably. They give depth and context to the world and characters, in turn making people care about them more. The in-game environment is there to support that. There's different creatures and species to interact with. World quests give the player the chance to explore the world and find things out for themselves, or send you down a 7-hour rabbit hole full of gnome people. The point is that the game has a lot for people to consume. And when there's a lot to take in, people start making a lot of things out of that to express their own ideas. Fan content is the single most driving factor for any media product, whether it's low effort memes that you post on social media to things like video edits, fan arts, and guess what? This damn video as well. These are really what I see as the driving factors to Genshin's absolutely dizzying success. The accessibility makes the game have an overwhelmingly large fan base. For marketing is what pushed the game out to fans nowadays, and for story is what keeps them playing. This was also alongside the extremely well-timed release in 2020, well, as much as we don't like to think about it, everyone was inside and had nothing to do. Genshin came out of nowhere for everyone to play and created the perfect environment for the game itself to thrive. Nowadays, I wouldn't consider it as impossibly popular as it was a year or two ago, but it still stands through the test of time. The game's teasers still get millions of views, and the community engaging with the game is still massive. Genshin really was the right thing at the right time in the right place. Many have tried to emulate it, but none come close other than the creators themselves. But with success, there's always going to be people wanting to jump on it for all the wrong reasons. Let's say you were walking down the street. What would you notice first? The people walking alongside you, the people on the phone, people talking amongst themselves, people eating food, or a guy in the middle of the road screaming and yelling, holding up a sign that says "Look at me" in bright red paint? People will always notice those who speak out, not the ones who just agree silently. This isn't something unheard of. You've probably heard this point reiterated over and over in videos like these, but when you repeat the same point over and over, and people still assume a minority is a majority, it becomes hard to stop saying it. If you try looking into it, you're gonna start seeing it everywhere. News channels do not have stories that are all about good, uplifting things. They're always gonna be about current affairs and what will keep a watcher or reader's attention. Media doesn't care about sentiment, media cares about retention and audience, and unfortunately for all of us, what gets the most attention is the toxic and just the downright disheartening. It takes such a small amount for drama nowadays to completely explode out of proportion. A single tweet sets off a chain of 1 million. This is really the overwhelming power of social media, so much more than any other media platform. We're constantly being exposed to drama and toxicity because that's what social media pushes, because it's getting engagements, because it's meant to elicit a reaction. It's a cycle that's become impossible to break. People can't stop and they won't stop because human nature is to engage and socialize. Communication and word of mouth has been weaponized into making people turn onto each other due to arbitrary nonsense, and it really spreads like a virus. There's this one fantastic video I really like, from someone you might have heard of called CGP Grey, a YouTuber infinitely wiser than me, and his video is on the exact thing I just described. Personally, I highly encourage you to watch the whole thing, but his video talks about how all thoughts are comparable to a virus, but a virus always needs a patient zero, so who would that be? I mean, it's pretty simple, really. It's a hard truth to swallow, but some people are really just plain evil. In my opinion, a lot of patient zeros are people always wanting to stir up trouble. They relish in pointless arguments and fruitless anger. Granted, there's a lot of people wanting to speak out about something they believe is right, but this always ends up in bad actors trying to twist it for their own means. These patient zeros, as I call them, are usually very few and far between, but it really only takes one or two to start a huge domino chain. We're given unfiltered access to these types of people through the internet, both extremely good characters and extremely bad characters, and we've even bore witness to the rise of some of the most deranged individuals out there. And even the line between what people consider good or evil has been blurred by the overwhelming amount of contradicting information on the internet, and you're gonna end up taking a side whether you like it or not. I'm sure if you think of any popular fandom, you either associate it with its IP or something happening within the community that gives it its infamy. You've seen fandoms like the Undertale fandom or the Dream SMP fandom, for example, get a negative reputation from both actual incidents but mostly assumptions. Again, it's not a majority, it's a minority, which I think is really important to distinguish. Yes, there's the argument that these fandoms view themselves through rose-tinted lenses, but as infamous as some of them are, they're usually right in saying that they aren't as bad as people made them out to be. Genshin Impact is no exception. What spurred me on to make this video were two very different Reddit posts. An original post about the Chinese Genshin community's reaction to Wanderer or Scaramouche, and another attempting to debunk it, so to say. Everything I read just confirmed exactly what I've been saying, that it really only takes one post to send ripples through the entire community, and each follow-up perpetuates the drama further and further. These accusations go from these Chinese forum users viewing him as a real-life enemy to going so far as attempting to dox Hoyoverse employees, attempting to use the government's powers to wipe him from the game, and even going so far as allegedly killing a cat for looking too close to a cat version of Wanderer. Yes, these are horrible things to do, but they're gonna be the minority, a plainly evil minority. We've seen this sort of thing happen over and over, not only in the Genshin Impact fandom, but in so many other fandoms. We're not strangers to these sorts of arguments where misinformation is so easily spread, and there's no real way of telling which side is in the right and which side is in the wrong. It escalates and escalates, somehow spiraling out of the control of the platform it's on, ending swiftly when one side falls. It's just saddening that the deprecation and deterioration of someone's life is the point where an argument stops, the point where the other side has won. Now, let's start talking about why these arguments start, and something I like to call the bubble effect. Gatekeeping is what people once referred to when deciding who comes into this circle or bubble of a fandom, but in recent times, it's usually been used to describe people who withhold information about virtually anything. For example, someone who doesn't tell where a certain bagel shop is in New York would be called a gatekeeper. Someone who finds it, beyond all possibility however, would be akin to a battering ram. Think of them like fortresses, hence gatekeeping, where the people inside decide who comes in from the outside, which other fortresses they trade and parlay with, which other fortresses they dislike. Some fortresses choose to keep their gates wide open, some fortresses check you thoroughly, some fortresses make it nigh impossible to get in. It's not like the fandom's going to actually check your credentials or anything, but in reality, if you engage in a tightly gatekept community without knowing anything, you're usually never going to be able to interact with them again. The fortress analogy works really well with how arguments between them work. Mr. Grey talks about how anger and hatred don't spread between two parties but within each group, exaggerating the twisted picture of the other side. The most reasonable person in one fortress would be the most evil one in the other, and people like to listen to those on their side and people who agree with their views rather than people who don't. Arguments devolve into people talking behind each other's backs, thinking that they're the ones right, and the process of debate is lost on them. One of the best examples of this that has really stuck with me is a debacle over a VTuber concert in Thailand on Twitter. A video posted from Twitter saying it was just a protected YouTube video. Understandably, the VTuber community didn't take this well, citing the effort and work put into the rigging, sculpting, and animation, while the people outside that bubble, the other side of the gate, began to mock it. Even brand names began to jump on it as well. This is a fantastic example of when something gets completely misinterpreted, and a classic example of why people gatekeep. Misinformation perpetuates the vicious cycle as the platform pushes the misinformation with the mass amount of engagements, spreading that piece of misinformation or misinterpretation further and further until it feels like it's just that one circle against the entire world. I know I'm just quoting loads of other YouTubers at this point, but there's another line from another YouTuber named DugDug that I really like.
There's this weird paradox that the more appealing something is to one group, the less appealing it is to other people. Talk about Dark Souls as an example. The reason that people love Dark Souls so much is the same reason most people hate it.
This is what I like to call the bubble effect. The more people inside like it, the more people outside dislike it for the exact same reasons. People called Genshin a Breath of the Wild clone, but its mechanics evolved far past that and is a reason for its success now. People called Genshin pedophilic, but its child characters act like children, not pedobait. The lenses of misinterpretation are prescribed strong, and you see many people who try the game have their opinions changed just because they've been fed the wrong information. Nowadays, the arguments against the game are just boiled down to gacha bad and some mismanagement issues on Hoyoverse's part in-game, but that previous legacy still tarnishes its reputation, preventing people from entering that bubble and leaving them with their misconceptions, lasting damage to the game as a whole. So, what's the point? You've sat through me talking about Genshin Impact and controversies and fandoms for almost 15 minutes now, and you're thinking, what am I supposed to take away from this? Really? You don't have to take anything away from this at all. That's right! You sat through a run! A proper run this time! You made it this far thinking it was some holier-than-thou shtick that I was about to tell you to go out there and be nice. Who do you take me for? I can't change the internet, so instead, I just talk at you for 15 minutes about everything wrong with it. And it's also a chance for me to reuse Fort of the Burial Valley again. Okay, in all seriousness, sometimes IPs get a little too big for their boots. Everyone wants their own little game to blow up, but no one's ready for the shockwave. No one knows when it'll blow up if something's an instant hit. Genshin Impact wasn't meant to be nearly as big as it is now, and the effect it's had is immeasurable, but no one was ready for it. That, in my eyes, is the Genshin Effect. Not just an IP too big for its boots, an IP not ready for the overwhelming popularity it might bring. You don't see things like Netflix shows or movies get the same treatment because they're all made with the mindset that this could be the next big thing, and they're prepared to receive that popularity. Things like content creation or indie games can't because they don't have the resources nor the experience, and that's what makes this market so volatile. We're making things for the hell of it, not for the consumer, and in both ways that's the advantage and disadvantage. This isn't to say that small indie creators shouldn't stop creating. I believe the complete opposite, which is why I'm making videos, but both creators and audiences alike should be mindful of each other. Well, after all this, I will leave you with one thing to take away. Sometimes, the only winning move is not to play.
And yet you keep on trying, mindlessly replying. You've been trolled, have a nice day.
As always, thank you for watching. I don't know if you can hear anything outside or like my fan going. It is like almost 30 degrees over here in the UK, but I managed to pump this out, so hopefully it's all fine. I'm sorry if this wasn't up to your standard of what you expected for the next video, but I wanted to try different editing styles and a different topic. I don't want to stay like a Blue Archive or like even a gacha game YouTuber, so I think just branching out was really good for me. As always, thank you for watching. You could consider liking or subscribing. I'm not opposed to it, but you know, whatever. I'll see you soon.